Assalamu alaikum. Distinguished guests, respected members, esteemed speakers, and participants who are joining us from across Pakistan, and those who have joined us here in person in Islamabad. On behalf of Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan and the Fiscal Laws Committee of ICAP, I warmly welcome you all to this dialogue on international taxation, strengthening Pakistan's voice in global tax governance. I would request to kindly observe a moment of silence so that we can have recitation from the Holy Quran. Now, I kindly request you all to please rise for the national anthem of Pakistan. Thank you. Please be seated. Now, to formally commence our today's dialogue, I would now like to invite Mr. Dishan Ijaz, Chairman, ICAP's Committee on Fiscal Laws, for the welcome address. Sir.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. First of all, thank you very much for all of you being here. The topic is quite interesting, and we did have a little bit short time, but still, I really appreciate all of you making it here. Especially, I am really grateful to Naveed Saab, Dr. Saab, Dr. Ishfaq Saab, Sadia, and Yaya being here, taking time out for sharing their views on an interesting topic which we have been hearing over the last 20 years, perhaps. And if you talk about Pakistan, the concepts like transfer pricing, BEPS, you talk about OECD regulations, and a lot of things which you might be aware of from time and time. But when it comes to practically applying those things, I believe there have been a gap in between. Either there is a disconnect from the policy making perspective, or there is a disconnect from the perspective of the the companies and the people who should be implementing those things. So effectively, the whole purpose here is that we need to understand what's happening in the world. When you talk about the regulations, especially from the taxation perspective, the world has changed globally a lot. From the Pakistan perspective, there seems to be a lot of disconnect. We are talking about the tax convention, UN tax convention. What is the rationale behind those things? Why those terminologies are being used, and why the global policymakers are sitting down to think about their impacts and the way forward when it comes to the global world is concerned. The primary objective, they talk about two, three things. Number one, the taxing of the digital economy. Number two, they talk about what is happening with respect of corruption or money laundering, and what is the illicit sort of transactions being carried out. And the number 3 point is very important: these connectivity with ESG, tax and ESG. That has become an important area where we need to have a connection between, especially coming from the country like Pakistan, basically. So I believe I won't be taking much of your time, but we have specialists who day in, day out, either part of that policy making, or they are actually executing those policies. So I would love to give the podium to them to run you through what's happening in the world. And then we have a session where we will definitely go through, have a connectivity between what's happening in the world and what we should be doing as far as this country is concerned. Obviously, it is going to be followed by a question and answer session where we would love to hear the thoughts of the panelists and answer to your questions wherever that would be possible. Thank you very much once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. For keynote address, we have Mr. Naveed Hanif with us, and he's going to talk about towards a fair and inclusive global tax system. Mr. Hanif is the Assistant Secretary General for Economic Development in the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, DESA. He's also the UN South Sherpa for the G20 Finance and Main Tracks. He joined UN DESA in 2001, a senior policy advisor in the Division for Sustainable Development, and a member for the World Summit on Sustainable Development. He has served as Chief of Policy Coordination and later as Director in the Office for Economic and Social Council. He is Director for Financing Sustainable Development Office and was the first head of DESA Strategic Planning Unit, which was established in 2010. He holds a master's in international political economy from Columbia University and a master's in English literature from Government College University, Lahore. Please put your hands together to welcome Mr. Naveed Hanif on stage.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, and thank you for your presence this afternoon. I want to thank Mr. Zishan Ijaz for the opportunity, and to Dr. Ishfaq, who is a very old friend, for suggesting that I should come to this platform to share with you what's going on at the international level, International Tax Cooperation, and of course, our resident coordinator, Muhammad Yahya, who made this possible. I will have to walk you through some slides, but before I do, because it's such a technical topic, I cannot just deliver a speech and get your attention. But before I start using these PowerPoint slides, I just want to emphasize two things for this conversation especially. First and foremost, and Mr. Zishan Ijaz captured it very well, the primary objective is to share with you what is happening at the global level on international tax cooperation. It's almost after 100 years, 115 years, we are changing tax rules in the world. The nexus of physical presence is disappearing. It's not a small change. When it was set in motion 115 years ago, no developing country was around the table in a fashion that they are now sitting around the table. It's not a small change. It's a major shift in global rulemaking. Second objective, and that's where you hold the key as tax professionals, please engage. There is a disconnect in what the rules are being set now, which may go on for 100 more years. I do not know, 50 more years. Technology may ask for changes far more rapidly than the last 100 years. So in the end, you will eventually implement these rules. You have to have a voice in shaping them. And that's why I have given up 3 days of my home leave to join you this afternoon. So please, this sacrifice should be rewarded. So let me begin with the context where we are. Global context, globalization, overused word, but digitalization, I would draw your attention to. That is where the rules became obsolete that we had thought would work for at least few more decades. Then multinationals all over the place and base erosion. I mean, they specialize in these things. They pay millions of dollars to get these things going on base erosion and profit shifting. And then developing countries, just, you are the markets now. That's where the people are. And disproportionately impacted by these rules, but very little voice. And then public sector, the financial crisis also brought these things forward. And G20, I must commend OECD and G20. They took the initiative to start addressing these problems, but in a fashion that would advance their interests. And that's understandable. An organization designed to advance the interests of G7 and other G20 now. So their approach was very narrowly focused. So, and this is criticism by developing countries, very loud at the United Nations, but in other fora also. Especially Africa became very active in ensuring that the rules of tax cooperation should be shaped through universal organizations, not OECD. OECD came up with a very interesting arrangement, inclusive framework, which was inclusive in name. You could go to Paris and attend meetings, but your voice was not heard. You did not matter in shaping the rules. So then we came up with the proposal of UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation. But I just want to, I hope, capture UN's role on taxation did not come out of the blue. We had a committee of experts who would advise, develop model conventions, but they did not have intergovernmental role where governments would consider their rulemaking as global norm setting. So Dr. Ishfaq is a member of this committee and very competent member who has shaped many outcomes in the tax committee's deliberations. So this committee existed in many forms, but in 2006 it was reshaped. So advising governments, promoting cooperation, shaping norms and policies. And I'm leaving the details to Dr. Ishfaq when he speaks. I want to bring to your attention one document where, here it is. We call it the FACTI panel report. Dr. Shahid Kardar, a former central bank governor, Punjab's finance minister, was a member of this panel. We made sure he was there. At the UN, when you have to advance ideas, you need political engagement. So we had a former prime minister, former president heading the panel, and I had the honor to lead the secretariat for that panel. So we call it the financial accountability, transparency, and integrity, because we could not call it a panel on illicit financial flows. There were objections by many countries. So this panel, because it was not governed by the rules of the General Assembly or Economic and Social Council, published a groundbreaking report. with ideas on UN tax convention, on combating corruption, tax evasion, money laundering. 14 recommendations in total. And some of them were drafted by Dr. Shahid Kardar. So I just want to mention 4 which stood out: tax convention, international tax cooperation body under the UN with universal membership, stronger measures against tax avoidance. Actually, that's such an aggressive practice on avoiding taxes that developing countries are simply sidelined when multinationals decide to avoid taxation. And then on illicit financial flows and transparency in public beneficial ownership registers. Still strong resistance, even within G20. They do not want any beneficial ownership registry which is open to public and country by country reporting. This panel laid the foundation for UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation. The African group led this political exercise in getting enough votes. It was voted upon, and I wasn't surprised. Developed countries were not keen to let their privilege go away. So Africa mobilized developing countries and adopted this resolution to achieve 4 goals: establish fully inclusive and effective international tax cooperation platform, then establish a system of governance capable of responding to existing and future tax-related challenges, and then inclusive, fair, transparent, efficient, equitable, and effective international tax system. Too many objectives, but these were their desires and wishes they wanted to see because they were denied these in other forums. And then legitimacy, certainty, resilience, and fairness of international tax rules. The sad thing about tax rules is even today, they announce they're giving you taxing rights. All over the world, you have right to tax, but you cannot exercise the right until there's international cooperation to let you do that. So that's the irony. They keep on saying, Pillar 1, oh, we're giving you taxing rights. Every market jurisdiction now has taxing rights, but you can't exercise unless you have access to data and the information in terms of profit generation on the basis of your citizens' data. So that tax cooperation was brought to the UN through this convention negotiations with 2 protocols. So we call them 3 work streams because they are run by 3 different groups: the convention work stream, protocol on taxation of services, then protocol on dispute resolution and dispute prevention and resolution. What is the convention all about? And why did we need 3 work streams? Because convention is supposed to serve 4 purposes, which are very broad, overarching, political. So 4, first and foremost, building an inclusive and effective tax system of governance. Second, overcoming challenges to domestic resource mobilization. Third, ensuring fair allocation of taxing rights. Fourth, tackling tax evasion and avoidance, especially by high net worth individuals. They are very mobile. And then addressing tax-related illicit financial flows. To get there, you need technical work through protocols. As of now, these 3 commitments are at the top. They will come to the remaining 4 in the later part of their negotiations. Early stages focus on effective prevention and resolution of tax disputes, fair allocation of taxing rights, and to make sure all taxation is not an end in itself. It has a societal objective to advance development of societies, to save the environment, to modify consumer behavior. So there's a larger objective that we want to pursue through better taxation globally as well. I just want to give you a glimpse of what they are dealing with and what they could eventually come up with in terms of commitments. So DRM and reclaims taxing rights lost a new business model, and digital is one such model. advocating rights for where business activity occurs, criteria focus on substance, value creation, and balanced impacts. And I think demand should also be there, but it's very difficult to push it right now. They say substance and value creation. Demand alone is not sufficient to give you taxing rights. And we think differently, but it's eventually a political decision. And fairness and subjective. The Framework Convention is expected to reflect core fairness principles. So commitments that we eventually are hoping to achieve is sharing taxing rights over related income and balance with principles of economic efficiency, tax neutrality, simplicity, and effects on cross-border trade and investment. And I must say, when you read Pillar 1, you wonder how will they implement it. Developing countries cannot implement Pillar 1. It's so complex. That kind of data is very hard to generate. I mean, United States can, some parts of Europe could. I don't think most of the developing countries can handle it. So we want simplicity, something that is easy to administer, implement, and eventually get you resources in your coffers. And of course, illicit financial flows remain a primary concern of many developing countries. Africa, the estimates differ, but they claim they lose from 50 to 70 billion dollars a year due to illicit financial flows, which is way less than the aid that they receive, the ODA they get from developed countries. So commit to regulating professional service providers. These are some of the outcomes from the recently concluded conference in Spain. There is a call to come up with global guidelines to look at the enablers' role in facilitating illicit financial flows. This is just a timeline. We have to end it by 2027. Very ambitious, given the complexity of the convention. But so far, they have done a good job in pushing it forward. They are meeting this week in New York to advance negotiations on the convention. They expect to have it completed by next May, and then hopefully protocols will be done by 2027. US tax professionals know it's not an easy undertaking when you have to cover such a broad canvas, both in terms of the convention and the protocols. I should walk quickly through this because I'm running short of time. So on cross-border services, one major challenge, because the services rendered to them by individuals sitting in developed countries, you can't tax them even if you have all the information about their income. So what we are trying to do is inject simplicity in this rules and come up with a fairly good proposal where cross-border services can be taxed by market jurisdictions in an effective manner. And there are potential solutions. These are just the core issues I mentioned to you. Most services payments as business profits, which is taxed only in the country of residence today, to the extent that a permanent establishment exists in the source country, which is different. But what I'm trying to convey that this rule is not easy to change. So just look at the list of potential solutions. Share taxing rights, or possibly different rules for different types of services and new standards. These are options on the table, but they still are not very clear what eventually will be the final deal, because it's not easy to give up your revenue stream. Eventually, it's the same pie they have to share with developing countries, and they are not comfortable sharing that pie, piece of the pie with you. So it's going to be a very tough undertaking on the digital services taxation. This is timeline I have already mentioned to you. Let's go to Protocol 2. which was not the preference of developing countries. They wanted to focus on a protocol in illicit financial flows. But diplomacy is the art of the possible. The European countries wanted to focus on dispute prevention and resolution. So they agreed on this protocol because by that time, US had decided to withdraw from the negotiations. New government had come in and they had decided to walk away from these negotiations. So the African countries wanted to keep the Europeans engaged and they accepted their proposal on dispute prevention and resolution. And I don't think they lost anything because it's very costly. Dispute resolution, when you have to handle individually as a country, is a very costly affair. You are charged a fortune by consultants and arbitrators before you get to a solution. So I don't think they have lost in terms of the topic, but it depends how it is eventually shaped. So is preventing and resolving cross-border tax disputes as the primary objective, but its provision of dispute settlement, the commitment on effective prevention and resolution of tax disputes is in the framework convention, but need to be aligned with the provisions of the protocol, the technical details in the political agreement. And the sources of disputes are mentioned here. Here are the main issues, and I just want to spend a minute because you may have something to add. I'm here to really seek your engagement and work with the government. They are very competently representing Pakistan, but your voices should be there. Look at the list. Tax litigation is time consuming and resource intensive, I just mentioned. Outcome may not be accepted by other countries, leaving risks of double taxation. Tax authorities faced asymmetry. Fact-finding tools and rules are also vary significantly across jurisdictions. The growing mobility of individuals and the complexity of global business structures, supply chains. Prevention and resolution mechanisms are only beneficial when they are fair, independent, accessible, and effective for taxpayers and tax authorities. And a strong system supports domestic source mobilization by increasing cross-border trade and investment, and legal certainty and reducing compliance burdens. That is where your voice should come through in these negotiations. You want something that can be implemented by countries like Pakistan, Indonesia, Egypt, Ghana. This is just the timeline, and that's the end of my presentation. But as I mentioned, I'm looking forward to this dialogue, and we would welcome your very pointed questions, what the UN is doing and how far off you see us from your concerns, and how can we bring those into these negotiations. Thank you again for your engagement.
Thank you very much, sir. Now it's time for some technical reflections on transformative changes to the UN Model Tax Convention 2025. And we would like to discuss its relevance and implications for Pakistan. And for this, we have none other than Dr. Muhammad Ishfaq Ahmed, former chairman FBR, with us. As former chairman, he has played a key role in modernizing the tax systems and enhancing the revenue collection. He has already demonstrated his commitment to fiscal reforms and efficient governance. In addition to his national contributions, he has also served as member of United Nations Committee of Experts on International Cooperation in Tax Matters, positioning him at the forefront of global tax policy dialogue and advocating for the interests of developing countries. Apart from this, he is a prolific researcher and author, widely cited work in areas such as political economy, tax reforms, and public policy. His publications, including Critique of Tax Amnesty Schemes, International Tax Conventions, reflect a bold and analytical voice in the discourse on equitable taxation and governance. His writing has appeared in leading journals like Asian Journal of Law and Economics, Journal of Tax Reforms, and Pakistan Development Review. He has earned his recognition both locally and internationally, and his deep insights and principled stance on taxation in developing economies has been valued always. Please put your hands together to welcome Dr. Muhammad Ashfaq Ahmed on stage.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it indeed is a pleasure to be here and speak on such an important topic, transformative changes to a UN Model Tax Convention and its and their implications and relevance for Pakistan. While I present my thoughts, you have to bear with me for my sore throat today. You just heard His Excellency Assistant Secretary General on something which is very hot, which is very topical, which has captured the mind of the world, particularly in the global south of late for the past 2 to 3 years. And it would continue to do so over the next 2 to 3 years, and maybe afterwards, after what depending on what we achieve in 2027. I'll be dealing with something more subdued, something more traditional, probably something more permanent, and that is the UN Tax Committee. When I say subdued, that doesn't mean less important in any manner, as you would see today. Before I plunge into the slide deck, let me put my disclaimer in that I continue to be a civil servant, and whatever I speak today, it has nothing to do with my official position or my institution, Federal Board of Revenue, or even the United Nations. Let's start with this is forward.
Yes, this.
Can you go one back?
Yes. 3-4 सेकंड का मिल लिया जूम पे शेयर नहीं सीरीज इस वन क्लिक करेंगे ना तो 3-4 सेकंड बाद स्टार्ट हो जाएगा.
Okay, thank you. Before I give you a quick rundown of what changes have been made over the past 4 years and which would be reflected in the UN model in 2025 and in a couple of months. Quick overview of what UN Tax Committee is. UN Tax were softly nominated by the governments, but primarily those are selected and appointed by the Secretary General. The committee's main objective is to strengthen international tax cooperation on domestic and international tax matters with a focus on the needs of developing countries. The first tax committee, the then ad hoc group of experts, was established back in 1967. Excuse me. White Resolution 1-73 of 1967, which ad hoc group with certain replacements through the 70s was able to roll out the first model tax convention in 1980, which was supposed to be excuse me, which was supposed to be contra to the OECD model. OECD model, like the Secretary General pointed out, was supposed to be a work for signing of tax treaties between countries at par level of development. When developing countries were thought to need tax treaties, that model was not found suitable. And that is where the UN had to come in and UN established this ad hoc group, which worked on basically the same boilerplate template of OECD model, but made substantial changes. And we had a first UN model, 1980. Since then, the committee sits for each 4 years, suggests changes which are reflected at the end of the tenure and reflected in the model for that year. The main task of the committee is to keep under review and update UN Model Tax Convention and the supporting infrastructure. The changes that we will be discussing today are in large number. Why I say in large number? Because this kind of massive tally has never been seen before by any tax committee in history. These are something like 10 major changes. Let me walk you through quickly. The very title of the UN Model Tax Convention stands changed. Article 1.3 has been incorporated, which is basically the subject to tax rule. We'll have a look at as to what it is. In a new article 5A has been inserted into the model. Commentary on Article 6 has changed substantially. Article 8, international transport, has been redone completely. Article 12.3, royalties, the definition of royalty has been rehashed. A new Article 12A has been inserted. Article 12C on insurance has been inserted. Then new paragraph 4 and 5 to Article 25 have been inserted. And then the big thing, fast track instrument, has been introduced, which has nothing to do with the model per se, but it has everything to do with the model, because whatever changes have been made into the model, these would be incorporated through the fast track instrument. Okay, first of all, the retitling of the UN Model Tax Convention. At the 28th session, the idea was proposed to have the title changed. There was a lot of discussion. Some members, particularly those from the developing world, they questioned the very legitimacy of the committee to change the title. A group was formed, deliberations were undertaken. Secretariat was also assigned to look into whether the committee was even empowered to undertake such a change. But more than that, a lot of discussion took place as to why we should change the title. There was an argument in support of that, and which said that UN is the only international universal organization, whereas the product of it, that is the model, carries a big tag, and that tag is, if you read down below, the United Nations Model Double Taxation Convention between developed and developing countries. So this was the tag between developed and developing countries was the bone of contention. Developing countries didn't want it because they thought it restricted the model's application, although model was for every UN member state. Any member state could select any provision of it or the entire model and apply it. But it was a kind of a restrictive model. Supporting argument was made that the OECD model, which basically is an intergovernmental institution, and the product OECD model doesn't carry such qualifier, although it is for certain set of countries. So this is supposed to be a universal model, and it must be accorded its universality. The committee had a long discussions, and at the end of its tenure, at the 30th session, it was decided to change the title. I have pretty much said these things, but it is reflective of the fact that probably UN Tax Committee, apart from what UN is doing at the intergovernmental level, we just heard the UN Convention on International Tax Cooperation. That's pretty much intergovernmental. UN Tax Committee is not intergovernmental per se. It's a group of experts. So even the UN Tax Committee appears to have come of age, and it is because of its own maturity as an institution that it was able to make certain decisions which has ramifications for and beyond that very period. We get to the next change, and that is the subject to tax rule. Both OECD and the UN, they do agree that where a state accepts treaty provisions that restrict its right to tax elements of income, it does so on the understanding that these elements of income are taxable in the other states, which means that international taxes regime, be that OECD's or the UN's, abhors international double non-taxation. However, as we know, the fact remains that a lot of double non-taxation does take place, which mostly emanates from the treaty provisions. OECD, as part of Pillar 2, came up with the solution. If you look at, it is probably over 1,000 pages long. It's an entire new article, which is to be implemented supposedly through an international convention. It's very complicated and complex, so to speak. The developing countries were not very happy with the arrangement, with the outcome of Pillar 2 solution. That's where very upfront at the first or second session of the committee back in 21-22, the committee decided to upfront address the issue of STTR. A lot of work was done over the next 4 years, and eventually the committee was able to come up with a very simple solution. It's just one paragraph, which has been added to Article 1 of the UN model. And if you look at, this is the complete text of that paragraph. I'm not going to get into its legal interpretation. You'll have it when it comes into force, but there are a few upshots of it, merits of it, in comparison to OECD's STTR. For instance, one, while OECD STTR is applicable to specified items of income, royalties, interest, and services, UN STTR envelops all incomes unless specifically excluded through negotiations by the treaty partners. OECD STTR excludes pension funds, investment funds, sovereign wealth funds, etc. UN STTR doesn't do that. We only provide a placeholder to be filled by the negotiating party. OECD STTR covers only a related party payments. UN STTR doesn't. It ropes in all payments. OECD STTR doesn't provide for the tax relief under Article 23, UN model does. If you are deeply interested in, I have recently written an extensive paper, a long paper covering all these changes. It's in the public domain. Kindly do have a look at it. But in the interest of time, I would like to get to this slide. It's just to give you a good flair of how complicated a solution could be, and generally the outcomes carry the intentions through. These are two leading international tax experts. Saul Picciotto is a professor emeritus of international tax law at the University of Manchester, and then leading Council of International Tax Law, Brian Arnold, who is a Canadian. And let me quote both of them on the two STTRs that we have side by side. Dr. Saul Picciotto says, expressing the skepticism vis-a-vis OECD STTR's efficacy, he argues that significant and detailed restrictions on the source country's right to tax under Pillar 2's STTR remain. Brian Arnold is even more pungent and scathing. Arnold states that OECD STTR, when analyzed, unpacked, and deciphered, turns out to be what it really is: nothing more than a sophisticated illusion of increased taxing rights for developing countries. Wherefore, developing countries should be very, very cautious about buying into it. We get to the next change, and that is Article 5A, which has been inserted into the model for the coverage of income from exploration for exploitation of natural resources. Let me give you an insight as to how this committee was working. There was a strategic thinking at some level. Few of us from Global South, we sat down. We knew there were certain things we couldn't change. For instance, permanent establishment is an institution which is what they call in German the Grundnorm of international tax law, the foundational pillar, if I may, and dates back to 1840s Prussian Empire. And the entire international tax system, be that under the UN or OECD, has been built on and around it. So we couldn't undo it. But what we decided was that to the extent possible, we should dilute its course of impact. So you would see that there are 5, 6, 7 carve-outs that we have created. And toward the end of the day, when we were having last session, our colleagues from developed world, they were saying that P article is as good as dead. There's nothing left in it. And this Article 5A has been introduced in that very perspective. We knew that there was already a legal regime in various treaties which were based on either the UN model or the OECD model, but those were pretty checkered, pretty broken. Different models and different treaties had different solutions. And the disadvantage was that those solutions were being benefited from massively by the multinationals which were dealing into these minerals. So at the 29th session, we came up with the brand new Article 5A, which covers all business streams related to minerals, and they are being taken care of properly. And we are very bullish that developing countries would be able to generate substantial resources from minerals going forward. Article 6, the Assistant Secretary General in his intervention had said that developed countries are pretty sensitive to the issue of illicit financial flows. That remains a fact. Over the past 4 years, when we interacted with them at the committee level, that was more than visible. We thought some of us, some members from Global South were very vociferous, very firm on the fact that Article 6 and the way it had been formulated was giving rise to illicit financial flows from developing countries to the developed countries, and much of the hard-earned foreign exchange was being siphoned off from Global South and was being dumped in the shining metropolises and the real estate there in developed countries. We identified 3 issues related to Article 6. First issue was the the definition of immovable property. The definition provided in Article 6 is a little strange. It says it vests authority to the definition provided in the cited states domestic tax law. Then it says that there are certain items which would anyway be considered real property, and then it takes another flip, and in the final part it says that certain items would not be deemed real property under any circumstance. There was a lot of confusion. We spent much of time on it. We wanted to come up with definition of real property in the model, but then we decided to drop it because we thought that we might breed more confusion as a result of this new definition. There are so many issues which have settled across the globe. If we come up with new formulation, it would generate new controversies, and we should avoid. And better sense prevailed, and we desisted from venturing into defining immovable property. The related issue was allocative principle. Some of us at the committee strongly argued that the allocative principle underlying Article 8 is flawed. I, for one, am very strong proponent of this view. If you look at all categories of international incomes, the taxing rights are shared on the basis of which state is providing capital. If interest income is, the resident states must get sharing right because capital is being provided by those countries. Dividends, capital gains, even royalties. But when it comes to the property, taxing rights are not aligned with the likely flow of capital. If you see, we are the end sufferers. Developing countries end up losing a lot of foreign exchange at the end of the year, because people siphon off money and invest in real property of various countries because of the attractive schemes or because of the attractive lifestyles that they have. But we as a nation, we committee members, as nationals of developing countries, we were of the view that it should be done. Unfortunately, probably the idea was a little premature, and the institute that the group was not all that ready at that point in time, and we couldn't do that. But we decided to amend the commentary, and we have amended the commentary, but maybe when the next session of the committee is convened, they get back to it. The same goes for illicit financial flows. It's connected to the allocator principle. We thought that the allocator principle should be refined, and we should connect it to the exchange of information regime, so that developing countries are able to curb illicit financial flows. Article 8, I guess if our committee has anything to take pride about, if they have to select one thing to take pride in, I think that was the rehashing of Article 8. Article 8's allocator principle was established back in 1927, and it has remained untouched since. It took us some effort to tinker with it. There was a lot of effort. There was a lot of wheeling dealing. Previously, as you know, you're all professionals, you know that Article 8, Alternative A, provided exclusive residence-based source taxation, both on airlines and ship lines. UN model, Article 8, Alternative B, also provided some sharing rights on ship lines to developing countries, to source countries. We said there is no good logic to exempting airlines in source state and taxation there. One of the sessions, that was 28th session, probably most memorable one. It was attended by 588 delegates, observers, airlines, ICAO, IATA. You just name of the industry, and they were there, and they were exerting tremendous pressure. But since committee works on the basis of one expert, one vote, we were able to carry it through. Now you have Alternative A, Article 8, Alternative A, which provides source taxation on airlines and on ship lines equally. This is about royalties. Developing countries have always grieved about not being able to tax incomes on sale of softwares. There were technicalities involved. The use of copyright was to be taxed, and the straight sales of softwares were not to be taxed, so forth and so on. We were able to develop a very good definition of royalties as contained in paragraph 12.3. This is a new style. It's not even in the OECD model. It's granularized. It's staggered, and it provides for industrial, commercial, and scientific equipment as well, which has been major concern at developing countries. And if you see 12.3c, for the use of or right to use any software and acquisition of any copy of software for the purposes of using it. Yes, the taxation of services has been all over the place. As you know, there was Article 14, there was then 12. 12A was brought in, then 12B was brought in, then 15 was already there, then 5.3A and 5.3B, service P, and then the construction P. So it was all kind of a minefield, which was very difficult for developing country tax administrations to be able to properly tax. One treatment was being given in one country, and in another country, another treatment was given on the same issue. Even at the intra-jurisdiction level, there were conflicting judgments. So we sat together and we thought to come up with one all-encompassing provision on taxation of services. And we came up with Article 12AA. 12AA cannibalizes 12A and 12 and 14. 12B still holds because there was a difference of opinion that 12B's nexus is slightly different. So it would need more time. Agreement couldn't arrive, couldn't be attained on 5.3A and 5.3B. Otherwise, those could have been cannibalized. So we have now Article 12AA, which is very wide in its nexus, any payment anywhere made for any kind of service. If it falls in your nexus, and if it comes up on the touchstone of base erosion, you should be able to tax it in Pakistan or in any developing country for that matter. 12C, insurance has been a migraine for most developing countries. We were not being able to tax insurance companies. They are mammoth organizations. They can hire the services of as top-notch professionals as you people are. Developing country tax administrations find it difficult to crack into and tax them properly. There was an arrangement, 5.6, but that was a very haphazard kind of arrangement. It was not very stable. Even reinsurance was excluded therefrom. That's where we thought we should work comprehensively, and we were able to come up with a standalone new article on taxation of insurance premiums. This was important because it has insurance as a direct nexus with SDGs. And there was another important factor at work, and that was that Global North is almost completely insured already. It's the Global South which is to be insured. And that is where more and more insurance companies are traveling to Global South to undertake insurance business. So there's a real potential going forward for developing countries. And it's important that we put a legal regime, we fix it, and we put a proper tax regime in place so that we get a fair share of the business. This is little technical. GATS Article 17, when it would come into conflict with any of the treaty provisions, and the dispute resolution mechanisms provided in both laws, they would be applicable. There would be a lot of confusion. The cases have emerged far and few in between, but yes, the potential was real, and that is where we brought in two more, Article 5 and 6 to paragraph 5 and 6 to Article 25. This is the fast track instrument. We thought that we make changes, we make very good changes to the model, but those changes do not get negotiated at the desired pace and at the desired level in terms of number of countries signing those. So at the UN level, we came up with this instrument, a fast track instrument, which is a very streamlined amendment mechanism to alter existing double taxation treaties. It is basically an intergovernmental process. Our job was to frame it, develop it, and send it back to the intergovernmental process. It's already gone to the intergovernmental process, and hopefully it will be through. Once it gets through and it gets implemented, we'll be able to incorporate most of the good provisions, of course, depending on the countries which treat these as good. We'll be able to amend our treaties in a cost-effective and efficient manner. At the moment, the protocols which are attached to the first draft are pension funds, gains on natural resources, fee for technical services, automated digital services, arbitration subject to tax rule, capital gains, and service permanent establishments. But we could add as many as and when we liked, more protocols. There's already a talk at the ATF level and the European continent. They are very aggressive, and they are already thinking to make it a minimum standard, which means that suppose 40 African countries agree on new Article 8, and they come up with the position. If any country wants to sign with one African country, they have to sign that with all African countries. So this is the kind of aggressive approach which is already being contemplated. There's the last thing, vis-a-vis Pakistan. I guess the challenges that Pakistan faces is Pakistan is I think it is overly networked already in tax treaties. We have 66 tax treaties, probably far more than one would like, at least far more than I would like. These were signed through 70s, 80s, 90s, and maybe few into 2010s. We are already networked with the OECD pretty extensively, Global Forum, CBCR, AOI, MAC, in every respect. Even our TP rules are pretty much the OECD legal infrastructure. Back in 2021, Pakistan resisted. Pakistan chose not to walk into the OECD solution, and I guess we had to withstand a lot of pressure, and I'm sure you would have to withstand a lot of pressure even now. There are pathways for most developing countries, and those are UN Tax Convention, as we saw this morning. In the first half, World Tax Organization, International Tax Code, these are all to be contemplated. FTI, and then most importantly, the South-South cooperation. With this, thank you very much for being patient and for bearing my bad throat, and would like to take questions when the opportunity arises. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your valuable insights. Now it's time to talk about BEPS reforms and challenges. And for that, we have none other than Ms. Sadia Nazir, Head of Transfer Pricing and International Tax, partner KPMG in Saudi Arabia, with us. She has over 25 years of experience in transfer pricing and international tax working in the United States. She holds a Master of Science from DePaul University, a Bachelor of Science from Northern Illinois University, and a Certified Public Accountant in Illinois. She has been an adjunct professor in the Master of Science in International Taxation program at the Northern Illinois University as well. Please put your hands together to welcome Ms. Sadia Nazir on the stage.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sadia Nazir. I'm partner with KPMG Saudi Arabia. I didn't prepare any slides today. My esteemed colleagues went through a lot of discussion around policy. So I thought I'll come in and speak from practical aspect. Obviously, I'm in a consultant role. I lead the international tax and transfer pricing practice for KPMG Saudi Arabia. I'm involved with actually Saudi government in developing the tax policies when it comes to Pillar 2, as well as the tax incentives in the light of new development from the OECD aspect, Pillar 2, or harmful tax practices and other regimes that may impact the framework and the thought process on go-forward basis. So where I would like to start, I thought that I'll provide a bit of history, but I think that's been covered in extensive detail why Pillar 2 came into play. It's, obviously after the financial crisis that was mentioned earlier, there was heavy focus by various jurisdictions to try to retain the tax revenue, where multinationals had very effective structures in place where the profits were being shifted from the high taxing jurisdictions to low tax jurisdictions. So as such, there was very high focus on how do we come up with a framework that provides this fair taxation, that provides a framework for the developing as well as developed countries to abide by. So Pillar 2, which is part of BEPS initiative, came into play. Obviously, there's a lot of history in the development of the program, but the framework was signed back in October of 2021, inclusive framework, where more than 130 countries agreed to adopt the Pillar 2 regime. So where I wanted to focus today was to just provide what is this Pillar 2, how does it get implemented, what are the various ways and mechanisms to collect the tax. Essentially, what is Pillar 2? It is asking an effective tax rate of 15% in every jurisdiction that a multinational is operating. So essentially stepping away from shifting your profit to a low tax jurisdiction from a high tax jurisdiction by providing this minimum tax, or it's also, obviously you've heard the phrase global minimum tax. So a minimum tax, effective tax of 15%, no matter where the multinational is operating in. There is a minimum threshold for this rule to apply where the multinational's revenue exceeds 750 million euros 2 out of the prior 4 years. And then the other aspect here is that the jurisdictions have to adopt the Pillar 2, even though inclusive framework was signed by closer to 140 countries. However, each jurisdiction has to adopt the Pillar 2 framework. The way the Pillar 2 framework works, there are 3 different mechanisms on how to collect this effective tax rate of minimum tax of 15%. The first one that you probably have heard most about is the qualified domestic minimum tax or domestic minimum tax, where each jurisdiction has to adopt a local tax policy to tax at a minimum of 15% for the profits that are being generated within that certain jurisdiction. The Pillar 2 becomes more controversial when there are 2 other ways of collecting this effective minimum tax. When those 2 mechanisms come into play, this is where the controversy is arising. Not so much controversial is the IIR where the right is given to the parent jurisdiction to collect a tax for the subsidiaries operating in a low tax jurisdiction at the minimum rate of 15%. But the most controversial provision is the UTPR under tax profit provision, which currently is in a very, very hot seat because of the US, Trump coming into the office January 20th. Obviously a lot of rules were signed right after he took office. One of the aspects that was brought into light was that he did not like Pillar 2. In fact, the statement came out where he said that anything signed by the Biden administration when it comes to tax policy that is going to be impacting the tax being collected by US multinationals will not be honored by his regime. And he asked the US Treasury Department to look into this issue in greater detail along with the OECD. So there has been a lot of movement in there's also a question on the viability of Pillar 2 on go-forward basis. There are a lot of countries out there, especially EU, that has already adopted Pillar 2 QDMTT, IIR, and the UTPR provisions. UTPR hasn't kicked in yet because there are some safe harbors that already are providing some shelter for collection of the taxes by multinationals under the UTPR regime. However, those safe harbors will expire soon. So now the question is that how do we deal with the UTPR on go-forward basis? This is where now US had raised concern. There was an agreement reached with the G7 countries, where the G7 countries agreed that they will not impose taxes under the UTPR mechanism for the US multinationals. Now the question is being raised, especially I'm sitting in Saudi, so I can raise my hand and say that, okay, why don't I get the special treatment? Why is US getting a special treatment? So that's where there's a lot of now uncertainty on the future of Pillar 2. Right after the US and the G7 agreement, Germany also announced or actually, I guess it was a statement put forth asking that perhaps EU should step away from the implementation of Pillar 2 as well. There's certainly a question, and there's also the statements being made by the statements out there trying to, I guess, maybe this is seen as a olive branch in terms of trying to shelter the jurisdiction from the tariff threat that may come from the US as well. So I've been doing a lot of policy work in the last 2 years being in the Middle East region, and the focus have been more, I want to look into the incentives program on go-forward basis and how do I make it more compliant from Pillar 2 aspect, where there is a term called qualified credits. However, now for past 5 or 6 months, the focus has been on more, okay, what is going to be surviving? Is Pillar 2 actually going to survive? So maybe I don't have to focus my energy on making my incentive, designing my incentive to make it more qualified. Maybe I look into what type of incentives are going to actually give me what the national interest is. Currently, what is my national interest sitting in Middle East is I'm heavily focused on diversifying my economy, stepping away from the oil revenue. There's a lot of focus on the foreign direct investment, the diversification in terms of bringing in the manufacturing, bringing in the distribution, bringing the financial sector. So why don't I focus my energy on developing and designing the incentives that will attract these sectors into the region? So where I sit right now, I see a lot of uncertainty. I do work quite a bit with the OECD in terms of the policy design, in terms of getting the reviews and the feedback from the harmful tax practice aspect. However, where I'm also asking the question, obviously there's a lot of confidential information that doesn't get shared with the consultants that often. However, it is the similar board that all the jurisdictions are in right now, where there was a lot of push to try to come up with the policy that is adhering to the Pillar 2 policy under the OECD. Currently, because of the uncertainty, there's a lot of sit and wait, see what happens. In terms of some of the large economies that haven't adopted Pillar 2 yet, I can name China, I can name India. US obviously has already, kind of decided and said that they're not adopting Pillar 2 in its full form. EU had rushed to adopt, but now there's a question mark on, which form is going to survive and go forward. So, again, I will say it again. I said it before. If I had to sum it up, where I am right now in terms of the policy and what the Pillar 2 status is right now, it's uncertain. It is obviously a good concept in terms of the fairness, in terms of the standardization. However, we will have to wait and see which form does survive. Maybe there's a Pillar 3 coming our way in terms of what's going to be surviving after, what gets chosen from the Pillar 2 regime. So with that, I wanted to give more of my aspect from the Pillar 2, from the policy, the questions that the multinationals are asking, just to provide a view from the regional aspect in the region where I'm sitting right now. And also obviously happy to answer if there are any questions specific to Pillar 2 or in general, because I do lead the international tax practice for KPMG in Middle East. So if there are any questions regarding any of the topics that were discussed earlier, happy to answer that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am Sadia. And as you said that you are happy to answer the questions, so I'll request you once again to please come on the stage and join us in the panel. With this, I would also request Sir Hanif Saab and Ishfaq Saab to please come on the stage. To moderate this session, we have none other than Mr. Anil Peter, member NRC, partner KPMG with over 22 years of international experience. I will request him to please come on the stage and moderate this session. And I'll encourage the audience to ask questions so that the discussion can continue in a meaningful way.
Thank you so much, Anika. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to all of you once again, and welcome to our worthy panelists. So after sharing your knowledge, ladies and gentlemen, this will be slightly different panel discussion where I won't be asking actually many questions. Idea is to give you all the opportunity to ask any questions, and it's not every day that we get the privilege of having our ex-chairman FBR or learned members from the UN or international tax partners present in Pakistan. So this is your opportunity. I think the mics are ready. I'll just open the floor with one. Okay, Rasha Saab, if you want to go first. I just thought, sir, if you want to go first, we just have the mic arranged. Until then, I'll ask one question and then we can go ahead. So my question is from Naveed Saab, the first question, sir. We have heard a lot of discussion on the UN tax model, Pillar 2, and different changes that have been coming over the years. For a layperson who doesn't understand how this all translates into international tax regime, can you please share the applicability or implementability of this UN tax model, that once the timelines you just shared, once those pass, is it a given it will just get implemented and get passed, or it depends on each country, how they adopt it, how they accept it? So just some light on that, please.
Thank you so much. It's an important question. I think you're talking about the convention, not
Yes,
the
sir.
model. So for every convention, regardless if it is in tax or ocean protection or plastic prohibition, there is always a clause called entry into force. So once the convention is finalized, then I think they will have at least 50 to 60 countries have to ratify before this convention enters into force. So every parliament will be asked to review the convention and then decide whether they want to ratify it. Let's say threshold is 60 countries to ratify the convention, and it enters into force after 2027, give or take 2 years, the entry into force happens. Our challenge is the largest jurisdiction in terms of digital economy is not sitting in the negotiations. So you cannot assume that it will be automatically applied to all jurisdictions. Like law of the sea, US is not a signature. But law of the sea is a law that everybody is adhering to. So what we foresee, the convention will be negotiated, countries will then consider ratification. Once we get the threshold number that cross, countries who have negotiated and those who will ratify, they will start implementing it.
Okay.
But they will be, of course, relying on the digital taxation provisions for the US cooperation. There is a problem.
So it's not a universal implementation of acceptability, as you said, it depends on.
Look, it's state parties who are
Yes,
negotiating
exactly.
and they adhere to it. But eventually, even non-state parties will decide to join. So it's a universal convention.
Universal.
It's open to additional signatories and ratifiers.
Thank you. Thank you. Rasha Saab, sir, you had a question, please. And we have participants from Multan. I can see Talat Saab. We have participants from Peshawar. So please feel free to ask any questions you have as well.
I have actually several questions, but I'll restrict a few with starting with Navisa. You, as Dr. Saab had said, that there is a OECD convention and then UN convention, and now you're remodeling UN convention. And then you have fast track instrument also, which will force countries to implement. But what about actually the countries who I suppose it's just a model which is to be adopted by the countries which are negotiating between themselves. So if there is now a visible difference between OECD and UN, then in certain clauses, what are implications for a country, for example, if they don't accept UN or OECD model, then how would UN come into, and how that will be tackled?
Thank you so much. But let me clarify. Model convention is different from the framework convention. What we have been doing, and Dr. Ishfaq can also elaborate, model conventions sometimes had three options of one clause: the OECD option, the UN option, and if any developed country wanted to offer the option. So model conventions were used by countries for bilateral treaties, and they could pick up either the OECD model or the UN paragraph. So they had a choice. In the framework convention, there are no choices. You are negotiating the whole convention. So while you are negotiating, you have to make sure your interests are safeguarded. Second, because all OECD members are part of these negotiations, so they cannot say there's an alternative available. Universal convention that is negotiated with everyone sitting around the room, it becomes a global norm. So there will be no alternatives to choose from. As of now, that is the understanding. I can't tell you after 2027 if some OECD countries start offering alternatives. As of today, that's not where we are headed. It's a universal framework convention that every party that has negotiated, ratified, will adhere to it.
So now if you look at BAPS and then IF inclusive framework, and then pillar 1, pillar 2, MTR. So as we heard from Sadia, that of course, US from the beginning was not very comfortable with the situation and they were raising issues. So what is the status now as far as UN concerned of all these initiatives?
First of all, UN does not have a position as an organization on these inclusive framework outcomes. These were negotiated by 130 jurisdictions, not countries. I think countries were less than 120. So those who were part of inclusive framework, they can decide whether they want to continue to adhere to it. UN Secretariat doesn't have a position for or against this arrangement, but some member states do have reservations on the outcome of inclusive framework, including the United States, which was part of it when they were negotiating it. So it's a choice of Dr. Ishfaq mentioned Pakistan was under immense pressure to go for pillar 1 and pillar 2 with Pakistan.
He was there then.
That's right.
Yes.
And we were in touch because Pakistan did convey clearly that we are not in a position to adhere to these pillars as they have been designed right now. And I think most developing countries had reservations, even those who went along. They had difficulty in implementing the provisions of these pillars. And those are now becoming evident that you cannot push these through because countries have serious concerns.
Yes, let me give you my perspective on that. The way UN Model Text Convention, OECD Model Text Convention work and the way they gel into an international tax system of sorts, if you like. Model is a kind of soft law. That's why, I mean, it's just a piece of paper if there's no sanctity attached to it. And in fact, it has no sanctity attached to it. The sanctity gets attached to it when the countries actually start adopting it. So that's where it's soft law. When it gets negotiated between two countries, between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, for instance, then it becomes hard law. Then it is a treaty. In most situations, if not most, many situations, the model itself is a treaty. I mean, 99.9% I have been negotiating treaties for so long. At times you just keep negotiating for days and days, and eventually you realize that eventually it's a model which you have signed up. Since we have come up with a large tally of amendments to the model, and it will be very, very difficult to now convince the developed countries into signing those. we expect that they would be dragging their feet and they would not be coming to the negotiating table first. And if they would be coming, they would be, opening up certain other issues which are already settled. That is where the FTI has been conceived and developed, which means that it's a very cost effective and efficient. You just sign FTI, and maybe your treaties with 40 countries would be amended in one go. But that again is an intergovernmental process, that something which state parties have to agree to, and that is a process which is being undertaken, and we hope that it concludes early, so that all the good changes that have been made to the model actually gets incorporated into the existing treaties and gets negotiated into the new treaties as well.
Thank you, sir. I think
Just one question, and that's the last question. Then I'll let others. Naveen, actually, you have been involved in Pakistan policies also, but the laws that are in place, as can be vouched by Dr. Saab, in Pakistan, they don't have any policy. They are under a lot of pressure from IMF and the existing taxpayers because of the tax and GDP ratio in the country. And internationally, the tax rates are being, softened. For example, in US, it's now 15%. The MTR is 15%. But in Pakistan, you see the corporate tax rate is as high as 50% or even more than 50%. How, under these circumstances, you feel what is the solution for the economy like Pakistan to address these issues?
I should leave this question to Dr. Ishwar. I don't want to comment. It's a very broad and big question, and I would refrain from commenting on Pakistani policies pursued by this government right now. Ishwar, over to you.
Even I would like to let it pass for a while, and Rashid, you and I could sit over coffee and discuss it.
Yes.
Okay?
So I think I see Talat sir has unmuted his mic. Sir, maybe if you have a question, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. May I have a question from Dr. Shah sir? Dr. Sir, there is a huge complaint and hue and cry regarding local taxpayers in Pakistan. Do you think that the taxpayers of abroad, for instance, non-residents who are filing returns in Pakistan, is their filing accurate, or there's also some issue in their filings?
If I understood your question correctly, you are asking if non-resident Pakistanis are able to file their taxes?
You have a lot of complaint about Pakistani taxpayers, that they are short declarant, non-declarant, and inaccurate declarant. And for instance, there is a campaign throughout the country that in such a big number of countrymen, only 4.5 million taxpayers are there. Do you think that non-residents, because their work is all documented and they can't escape taxation, are you satisfied with the declaration of non-residents about their tax returns?
That's a very important aspect you have brought up. Thank you very much. Non-resident Pakistanis are a very important part of our economy. They contribute in terms of massive amounts of foreign remittances, and they provide the oxygen supply line to the economy. Their tax issues are here and there. our tax system treats them as good or bad as it treats their resident counterparts. But in overall terms, I guess non-residents are their tax issues to engage with the tax system are in limited number. Those who live abroad, they are supposed to be filing the tax declarations vis-a-vis the incomes which they earn in Pakistan. They're mostly, interest incomes are residential property, rental incomes, and all that. They undergo source taxation. So I don't think there are many issues in that, and they're generally, this is my personal experience, they're generally very good taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So we have time for 2 more questions, I think, from the audience, sir. Ijaz sir. Mike, please. Excuse me, can we have the mic, please? Kahan pe? Sorry? Mic kahan hai? Sir.
Thank you for the nice presentation. What I could understand is that this is a process of adoption and identification process. So I think we are targeting something 5 years from down the line from now. But if I remember, we had a multilateral agreement in 2016 or 17 perhaps, where we thought that there will be shortcut process to revamp the region, the agreements which are already done, and everything will change. But that was selected. There was selected option for that. But I think it's coming up from that.
Redwood, sir, thank you. Good question. The multilateral instrument which you are talking about, it was basically OECD instrument, which was rolled out back in 2018, 19. Hira, if I'm not wrong, 2019, which was supposed to implement the minimum standards which were agreed upon under BAPS. Those were 4 minimum standards, and all countries were asked to sign to that MLI, through which their treaties stood amended to the extent of those minimum standards, which are more kind of principles. You would abhor the base erosion and all that. To that extent, that system worked very well, but it doesn't have impact on the ground because it did not tinker with the taxation rights. Our problem in the global south is that over the past 30-40 years, in our enthusiasm and eagerness to get integrated into the world economies, when the new liberal economics was the order of the day and everyone was talking about, and we just rushed into, we went at a faster pace. So we were the first one to sign the treaty with the US, tax treaty with the US in 1958. The same happened on bilateral investment treaties. We were the first one to sign a very spurious, if I may, bilateral investment treaty with Germany back in 1958, in which we were the first country to sign, dispute resolution outside Pakistan, ICAP and all that. So I think that kind of momentum that was built back in 60s and 70s, that has impacted. We have lost so many cases at the international tribunals. At least 4 or 5 awards have been given out against us. One, the Ricodic He was the one who was finally negotiating in Istanbul back in 21-22. It was not a very pleasant experience. There were 6 billion worth of award lurking over your head, and you have to negotiate with them. And these were all avoidable. We should have thought before we got into those kind of coercive frameworks. I keep saying it's about time that we reappraise each and every treaty that we have signed. We already have 122 international economic agreements with other countries, and we have never gotten back to reappraise as to what we got out of that. A lot needs to be done. A lot of belt tightening is required. So just to cap, that was OECD instrument. Yes, we signed it. The world got a lot of experience out of that. And to give the devil its due, I think the FTI that we are devising, we have devised at the UN level, it's pretty much, it appears to be emanating from the OECD experience itself.
Thank you, sir. I think we have just, oh, sir. Ji, sir.
Associated with WTO, and I know that the agreement was signed very quickly because President wanted to sign it in his name. Anyhow, Nisab, you just heard Dr. Saab told that what happened with MLI. In MLI, I think there was an option, and Pakistan adopted very few clauses out of it, as far as I know. So what about this framework? Is it has to be adopted as a whole, or there is a choice, clause by clause, or item by item, or to take some and give up some? And will it, as Rashid also asked this, it will apply across the board after it's certified, or what? And it will not end up like MLI. That's my concern.
They have learned lessons from MLI globally. So in many conventions, there's a provision to opt out. Most likely, it's not there yet. They have just started working. This convention may have a provision for countries to opt out of certain clauses. It will not be all or nothing. That's my guess. The sense of the room is countries would like to opt out of certain clauses. That provision will exist, but the problem is if every country starts opting out, then the convention weakens. So they will also have a certain minimum level of adherence and core requirements. If you want to become a state party, you cannot opt out of the following clauses. That will also be in the convention. So that's my guess.
Future of this new framework, the right of MLI, and if countries start pulling out of it, and I don't know what can be that minimum adherence. It cannot be take it or leave it. International tenants cannot be like that. Take it or leave it. So how do you see this future after 20?
So I have a different view on this because perhaps I'm coming more from the taxpayer angle, not so much from the governmental policy aspect. As a multinational, when I'm looking into investment, when I'm looking into expanding into a jurisdiction, typically tax treaties are the first thing that we will be looking at from the tax angle if there is a tax treaty, because at minimum, if it doesn't, certainly there are some favorable regimes under the light of the treaty in terms of the withholding taxes and so forth. However, where the bulk resides right now is in terms of the controversy, the access to the competent authority, either via advanced pricing agreements or the MAPS proceedings. And that's typically is the starting point for us from the tax advisor to see if we feel comfortable having the presence from tax aspect in a certain jurisdiction in case of a controversy, if what access we have to the taxing authorities. So, from if let's say if the Pillar 2 for some reason there are certain amendments to it in the future, and it doesn't get implemented as it's being proposed, That's where I would see that the provision related to the access to the competent authority and for the taxing authorities to come to the table for the negotiations for the resolution being used in terms of for the taxpayers as to how they avail themselves of the treaty benefit. Either in case the pillar 2 happens in the form it's being proposed, because then there's a UTPR provision that I was proposing, that I was talking about earlier, that is creating a lot of controversy. And then we have to yet and see how jurisdictions are going to be implementing and what results comes out of it in terms of the taxing rights. Or, if it doesn't get implemented as we are proposing, then, there's still uncertainty in terms of the taxing rights and then how we avail ourselves as a taxpayer to the treaty benefits under the double tax treaty framework.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm extremely sorry we're out of time. I'm sure we have so many questions, but we can even catch later. But thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for giving time first for the presentations and now for the panel discussion. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for the panelists. Thank you. Thank you.
To conclude today's dialogue, I would like to invite Mr. Muhammad Yahya, UN Resident Coordinator for Pakistan, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Mine is a simple job, is to just thank you all for coming, for participating. I want to specifically thank Mr. Saifullah, the president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants for Pakistan, for his leadership and warmly welcoming us all here today. I also want to thank Zishan Ijaz, chairman of the I Institute as well. I'm also asked to thank, and we should definitely thank everybody who has participated here today. I specifically want to thank our boss, Assistant Secretary General, for coming, for taking time off his holiday, participating. It shows his, we're very lucky that we have an Assistant Secretary General who also happens to be a Pakistani, so we can always use his nationality as a way of inducing him to come here and more engage with us. Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary General. The exchanges, I think you will agree, has reminded all of us why the international tax cooperation matters, not only to equity, but also to sustainable development. And the questions, I think, touched on many of those issues. Thank you very much. And the UN here is with you. We are happy to engage with all of you anytime you need us to. And we've just exchanged cards, and hopefully this initiative that was started in terms of the dialogue with the President of Assistant Secretary General will be just a start of a much more in-depth engagement and support. Thank you very much and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much, sir. Now as we are about to conclude our today's session, I would request Mr. Zishan Ijaz and Naveed Saab to please come on the stage and give the sheet to the participants. First of all, I would request Mr. Muhammad Yahya, our UN Resident Coordinator for Pakistan, to please come on the stage. We're very grateful to have you here, sir. Now I would request Dr. Ashfaq to please come on the stage. Now I would request Ma'am Sadia to please come on the stage. I would like to request Anil to please come on the stage so that you and Zishan sab can give shield to Naveed sab. And now I would request Zishan sab to kindly give shield to Anil for arranging all this. Okay, it's my turn. So with this, we conclude our today's session, and I would request you all to kindly join us for the high tea. Oh, yes. A very important thing we were missing. First, I would request the panelists to come on the stage for the group picture, and then we are going to have a group picture with the participants.